Hello, and welcome to episode 39 of the Motivational Millennial podcast. In honor of Valentine's Day, we are happy to share with you the story of Dr. Julia Rafal-Baer, our Motivational Millennial guest today, because she exhibits such amazing love and passion and compassion for students and education and is a powerful force in the world. So stick around for her amazing insights and story, and also for the after show where Blake and I will share our biggest takeaways.
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to the Motivational Millennial podcast, where we talk with inspiring members of the millennial generation who are living life with a sense of purpose and achieving their dreams. I'm Ivy LeClaire.
And I'm Blake Brandis.
Our Motivational Millennial guest today is Dr. Julia Rafal-Baer. Julia is Chief Operating Officer at Chiefs for Change, a nonprofit network of state and district education leaders dedicated to preparing all students for today's world and tomorrow's. Julia was previously Assistant Commissioner of the New York State Education Department, where she was responsible for the strategy, management, and implementation of teacher and leader initiatives under the state's Race for the Top grant, Teacher Initiative Fund grant, and other statewide initiatives, managing more than $150 million in federal funds. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
We're so happy to have you, and we'd love to hear more about what you're up to now and what you love about it.
So as you had mentioned in the intro, I'm at Chiefs for Change. We are a coalition of state education chiefs and district education chiefs. All of our members are committed and dedicated to excellence and equity for all students. What I love so much about this is I get to wake up every single day and I get to support and advocate for some of our country's boldest and most strategic education leaders. Our members are all over the country, and I get to help create a community of practice for them, where they come together, where they share ideas, where they share challenges, where they have this supportive environment. And it's honestly been one of the greatest professional experiences I could ever dreamed of having, to be able to look across education systems at this level and with these kind of system leaders. It's been incredible getting to grow an organization as well. We're now in our second year. We are a independent, bipartisan organization, and I've gotten to take this organization from full startup phase to a place where now we've got this greater level of clarity about what our focus is. We've got a greater level of sophistication in terms of our systems, our processes, and we've got a very clear policy agenda that we are working on as a membership. And probably the greatest gift of all has been some new programming that we've been doing around our Future Chiefs work. So we are working really hard to find that next generation of leaders. We are specifically focused on leaders of color. Our first cohort was 75% leaders of color, and we help to give them support, give them coaching and mentoring, help them with their job search, and fold them into our community of practice so that they can learn from the country's most courageous and boldest education leaders and help better prepare them for when it's their turn to lead. And we are in the process now of selecting our second cohort. I just got to spend the entire day watching all of the finalists, their videos and their personal narratives, and talking about the next cohort. So I am feeling very energized and love so much that this is the work that I get to be doing.
That's so incredible. I wonder how your passion for education came about.
My education journey has been a bit of a complicated one. I am a person who identifies as an individual with disabilities, and my disabilities are not visible. And it's something that I really struggled with. I struggled to no end in school. There are many people that probably are incredibly surprised at where I've ended up in my life, because school was a really tough place for me. I felt frustrated. I felt alienated. I hurt a lot. I was the kid who was suspended. I was kicked out of school, and I could have ended up in a very, very different place than sitting here today talking with you all on this podcast. And honestly, the biggest thing that saved me was throughout my life, I had a series of people that were committed fully to my development. I became a competitive figure skater at a very, very young age, which allowed me to take this passion and this talent that I had and really channel all the frustration and struggle that I was having in school. And skating allowed me to navigate these really, really tough years in traditional schools. And I somehow miraculously made it into college. And once there, I completely changed and thrived. Everything about college was completely different from my middle and high school years. I found my way in a learning environment that was so much more aligned to my needs, and I had the support from the just incredible director of the Disability Support Service Office at my university, who really helped me to receive support services that caused my learning to dramatically change. I ended up pursuing a very, very disciplined path in college, and I discovered at the time that I really wanted to serve people with disabilities, and really felt strongly that I could channel the frustrations and the difficulties and the challenges that I'd had in my own schooling, and that feeling of alienation and hurt, and be able to help others that were feeling similar things. Early on in my career, I ended up having this other mentor, this former classroom teacher. She saw more in me than I ever thought possible. And she pushed me really hard to apply for the Marshall Scholarship. At the time, I thought it was crazy. I thought there was absolutely no way. It was not in my cards. And she really, really pushed me. And that ended up further transforming my path and pushed me deeper into a career path around policy and around advocacy. And had I not had these individuals in my life, had I not had my skating coach, had I not had this director in college, had I not had this early career mentor who really pushed me in terms of the scholarship, I would never have ended up where I was, never would have ended up on a path towards education and wanting to become a teacher to serve others who are struggling with disabilities. But these people, they inspired me to see so much more in myself and so much than I thought possible. And it was because of them that I believed I could become an educator, and that I could try to create for students that kind of challenging and rich and engaging learning experience that would have fundamentally have changed my life when I had been a student. So that's sort of how I ended up in education.
That's so inspiring. Thank you for sharing that journey. And I think really speaks to both your own determination and the power of community and the importance of community in supporting students as they grow at all stages. And based on that incredible trajectory, and I know even since doing the PhD at Cambridge and the Marshall, you've gone on to do even more amazing things. What is the biggest dream you feel that you've accomplished so far, and in what ways did you have to grow to achieve it?
I had a really, really rough experience at the beginning of my teaching experience in New York. So love to answer that by just sharing a little bit of a story of context, but I promise that it will then get to the answer to your question.
Yeah, well, that's great. I was actually my other question was going to be, how did teaching in the Bronx affect your journey? So you're covering both at the same time. Thank you.
Yes, they definitely are very connected, inextricably linked. So when I went into teaching, I thought a lot about how I wanted to try to create for my students this different kind of learning experience, that I wanted to make sure that my kids really, really understood that I was there for them, and that this sort of relentless pursuit of excellence would permeate. But what I just didn't realize when I first got into the classroom was just how intense some of this system dysfunction is. Very well-intentioned policies get put into place, and as they trickle down into the classroom, there's just these disjunctions that occur where you end up as a classroom teacher feeling as if your hands are constantly tied by some of these different structures. And there oftentimes can feel this vast disconnect between the reality of what your kids need and the sanctioned solutions that you have as a teacher in order to best help them. So when I was teaching during that first year, I just got so deeply frustrated by some of these policies and the structures. I had multiple curriculums being handed to me all within one school year. We would get professional development and coaching that was completely disjointed from our classroom, oftentimes not being coached or mentored by those who had even taught in similar subject areas. And the biggest challenge for me was that so many of my students who had services that they were supposed to be getting were not receiving these legally mandated services. And at one point, I had a student who had not been receiving services. There had been multiple very serious infractions, including an assault on another student, and nothing was changing. I would report things and go through all the process that I was told to do, but without seeing anything change. And finally, one day, this student ended up physically assaulting me. And my principal basically said to me that my only option was to file a police report so that was it. It was file a police report or the student was coming back into my classroom. I think the option was, should be able to, there'd be a detention or something like that. And at the time I was so angry. I could not fathom that I was being told that after being physically assaulted and after the same student had been one that had been both physically and sexually assaulting other students, that our only recourse was to file a police report. And here's the big kicker. The student was in third grade.
Wow.
This is a third grade student that I'm being told our only option is to start a prison pipeline trajectory. And so I spent that evening after this conversation with the principal, and I wrote a very passionate letter to Joel Klein, then the Chancellor of New York City Schools, outlining my concerns. Chancellor Joel Klein, he is a guy who was overseeing a system with 1.1 million students. And you know what? He emailed me back within 10 minutes. It's crazy. It's an incredible anomaly. Most teachers don't get that, but it was an experience that completely transformed me. He responded, he thanked me for my service, and then he got his team to work. He looped in like 10 people on the CC of this email and was telling everyone all the things that needed to happen. And the very next day, people from his office came to my school, and it turned out that there were a number of different issues that were able to get addressed, and things changed immediately. And on top of that, I then ended up getting invited into a special group of people who were able to then meet with the mayor and to share some of our experiences that were going on in the classroom. And that entire experience transformed me. It taught me the importance of courageous advocacy. It proved to me that even one person could make an incredible difference on a system. But back then, there wasn't a path that would have allowed me to impact policy. I frankly wouldn't have even understood what policy was. I knew that there were problems. I knew that the system was not leading to positive impact for my students, and it was not allowing me to effectively advocate for my kids or their needs. But I knew that there was something that was causing this. And I also knew that someone like Joel Klein actually cared deeply about what was happening to me in my tiny little classroom in the Bronx. And so that's what really ended up both being one of my proudest moments in my career, but it also is what fully changed the trajectory of my career. I realized at that point that seeking out a path where I could better understand policy and where I could get as high up into the system level as I could go to positively impact kids and to make sure that I did everything in my power to make sure that policies that were being developed had the voice of teachers always, every step of the way, and that we constantly were asking ourselves if what we were doing was going to help change outcomes for kids, and to be that voice for change was really critical to me. So it fundamentally changed everything, and then became a big part of my own leadership trajectory. So that by the time I became Assistant Commissioner of Education in New York State, the same state where I had been that little classroom teacher at the beginning of my career, I made sure that I was committed every day to policies and implementation plans that would help our schools put the very best teachers they possibly could in front of kids every single day. I was able to successfully advocate to get more than $80 million in our Race to the Top funds that we used to support teachers and leaders across the state. And we ended up getting to support a third of the districts through these funds, something called the Strengthening Teacher and Leader Effectiveness Grants. And these funds help to ensure that our most successful educators would be able to receive supports so they could build long careers in our schools. And I was able to help make sure that we had a special priority for teachers of students with disabilities and teachers of English language learners, and really felt like I could see throughout the process and throughout the grants my experience as a classroom teacher, making sure that we shaped how we used those funds and the kind of supports that we gave to teachers that had been just like me. It was an incredible privilege to be able to go back to New York and to spend those 5 years working with educators across the state to make sure that their voice helped impact policy. And my proudest moment was when, right before I left New York, I was able to successfully get the Board of Regents to unanimously approve the recommendations that we'd been building for 5 years to develop career ladders that would ensure that every single New York educator would have a pathway that would let the most outstanding take on new responsibilities and build new schools without having to give up regular teaching and to lead from the classroom. And I was so proud of that work. And I felt like it was a true moment for me of being able to see through work that had been so critical throughout my career, and to enable these teacher leaders to really bring their bold ideas to fruition and redefine this conversation in New York around the power of teacher leadership and advocacy.
What a remarkable journey, and such a great example, too, of identifying a problem that was very present and real to you, in the classroom, and then scaling up a solution that had a much broader impact.
Yeah, the common thread through your story that I'm finding so inspiring is this sense of agency that you had that, sometimes, as I'm sure you've seen, when you are faced with these systemic problems, there can be a feeling of powerlessness. Like, oh my gosh, this is such a big problem. What can I do? And I love that even from the very beginning in that initial decision where you decided, you know what, I'm going to write a letter right now and you're going to send it. And that is a part of who you are as you're telling this story. And I wonder, what do you say to people who are experiencing that sense of powerlessness or hopelessness in the face of something so large?
I think a big part on this is being able to find something that grounds you, something that feels urgent, something that feels super personal, and being able to rely on that in those moments, and being able to have that something that can carry you and really help you to feel like, if it's not you, then who else? And knowing that at the end of the day, the only way that we're going to make any sort of changes in the world that we're living in is if you can use those moments, those road less traveled kind of moment, and being able to then take these personal experiences and take that urgency, take that person that inspires you, and have that always in the back of your head for why you're doing things. Every single day that I was making decisions when I was in New York, I thought about that student and that moment when I was being asked to make a decision that would have fundamentally changed his life and started a prison pipeline. And I thought of that student. I think of the student truly almost on a daily basis. And it drives me to keep putting myself back into the work. And it drives me to keep advocating in strong ways, because I know at the end of the day that everything that I'm trying to move forward really fundamentally always comes back down to the student. That's the person that we're trying to make the world better for.
That's a great reminder. And I know along the way in your journey, obviously, this was not an easy path. Obviously, you said personally for your path in the education system, but even I know as you advanced further along in your professional career, is there one particular challenge that stands out to you as being very significant along the way? And what was it like for you to overcome that challenge?
It's tough on this one, because there is sort of the obvious that, as a person who has non-visible disabilities, it has been an incredible challenge throughout my life, trying to navigate both, the schooling kind of aspects of life, as well as just sort of the general, the kind of social part, and also then trying to channel that energy in a positive way. I'd say sort of the more recent piece on these challenges for me has been trying to navigate being young and being in leadership positions. It's been really difficult at different stages, and particularly working in a field that involves politics and that involves these kind of bureaucracies, there can be a lot of haters, and I've had some challenges. I've had situations where people have wanted to say things about how I got into my leadership role that have nothing to do with my professional skills, if you know where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of hate and that kind of level of gossip and all these things that you think that are just a high school thing or even a middle school thing, you start to realize they don't go away. And as adults, it plays out in equally challenging ways. I've had many political challenges at this point where my job has been challenged by others, people who didn't want me in my role because I was not giving into, their version of reality. And those kind of things you get tested all the time on. And I've just come to realize, and it's such a big piece of my own leadership journey, that when you feel passionate about something and you're excited about it, you have to just remember, particularly in areas that involve service, it's exciting that you get chosen for the work, but the work is not about you. It is a means to a mission, but it is not about you. You will feel inconvenienced. You will be frustrated. You will be mistreated. You will be disregarded. And in fact, you will be gossiped and critiqued all the time. But if you can remind yourself in those moments that it is not about you, that it's about yielding to a mission that is greater than you, that you need to keep trying, that you will fail and that you will get it wrong 1,000 times before you get it right, but that pressing and persisting and demanding the best and the most from yourself and others is what will help prevail. And for me, it was about my own trajectory, about learning to not pay attention to it, which was very hard for me. It was learning how to really shake it off. At one point, my favorite John King story in New York. So John King, who just finished as our Secretary of Education, he was the commissioner in New York. John King, one night I was very upset about some of the haters, and it was really, really tough. And there had been something really terrible, some gossipy stuff that had been being said. And I called him up and he said to me, in the words of Taylor Swift, he said, players going to play and haters going to hate, but you just got to shake it off. And it was my favorite John King moment. And it's, he's so funny. And it was so what at the moment I needed to just remember that it really, this stuff, it's not about you. It truly is not. But if you can rise above it and you can stay committed to the mission, and you can stay committed, in my case, to that student that I think about constantly, you can get by and you can serve and you can learn to really lead. And you can change outcomes, you can change communities, but you've got to be constantly humble and you've got to constantly keep your focus and your investment on those with whom you're doing the work for.
How do you balance what I think is so common among especially millennial generation, but young people throughout history, which is this desire to, fulfill your destiny or, fulfill your passion, combined with what you're talking to, which is a very real sense of patience and resilience and sacrifice that goes into doing and pursuing a mission and vision that are bigger than yourself. So for you, because you've overcome so many different challenges along the way. How do you balance that personal vision for how you want your life to be with this bigger mission of, helping kids and increasing, equity across the school system?
I've never really thought too much about, because I feel like the path became so clear to me after I was in that classroom teaching. It's been so clear to me about the direction of where I needed to serve and how I needed to live my life. And I've been really crystal clear about the fact that the kind of role and the kind of work that I want to do was always going to be about serving others and serving an education system, and just absolutely focused on this issue of equity. And so, I guess I'd say to others on this is really, for those that want to have a life that involves service, thinking about what role you'll play and making sure that that voice that's in the back of our minds that comes calling, that you're constantly remembering that it's this choice to be a part of change, this choice to say that you have this commitment to try to help transform community, and just keeping yourself constantly humble and constantly focused on what's driving you to the work, to me, is just the best thing that you can do to get on that path.
So you've mentioned a few things that when you look back, you're really proud about. And I'm wondering if there is an accomplishment that jumps out to you that when you look back, it surprised you either at the time or now in retrospect. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, or I can't believe that happened.
There's a couple of things that I am still shocked about in my career path. I still can't believe that I had the incredible privilege that I had in New York to become assistant commissioner and to be able to serve the number of educators that I was able to serve, in that role. One of the things that I'm incredibly proud of that we were able to do was the work that we were able to lead on trying to spend Race to the Top and our other federal funds in ways that went beyond just business as usual. There was a lot of work that we were doing in New York to change outcomes in education. There was the change in the standards, there were change in assessments, there were changes in terms of human capital initiatives, things like how we were evaluating educators, changes to professional development, and the list went on, and it was a lot. And one of the things that would have been really, really easy to do would have been to just simply keep business as usual in terms of funding and to have put money out in a formula where everyone would have just gotten some pot of the money. And we really wrestled with how to make sense of the opportunity in front of us. And there were so many different funds because no one had known that the state was, for sure going to win Race to the Top. And so there had been other grants and things that the state had been applying for, and they ended up winning basically all of them. And so you had this moment in time where a lot of money and a lot of different interest groups with different ideas for how that money should get spent. We had no shortage of people with ideas on how they wanted to spend that money. And we came together, we did extensive community outreach. We went all over the state, talking with different groups, getting feedback and direction. And ultimately it became this sort of omnibus $150 million fund that I got to oversee and was there every step of the way as we were meeting with different stakeholder groups and making these decisions about how we could best serve educators. And I was so proud of the work that we did to create this comprehensive set of initiatives for teachers and for principals across the state. They were initiatives that we branded around this continuum. We did significant outreach work to make sure that people understood how all of these initiatives fit together, how we were thinking about all stages of educators' careers and how the money could be leveraged and how many, many different groups would have opportunities to think about things in much more innovative ways and to be able to access those dollars. Then we spent so much time on storytelling, trying to share those stories, sharing the bright spots, sharing the innovations, things that people had no idea they could even do with funds. And then we spent a whole lot of time at the end teaching people about how they could better spend their federal funds to keep the work going. I'm sure it sounds incredibly dry, but there was so much money and there was so much opportunity that no one was taking a step back and realizing what could be done differently. And we really used that opportunity to show people with new money, and then we're able to help show them at the end how their existing funds could then be used in these ways that they had never imagined to keep the work going that they were excited about. And when I look at all of that, I always end up going back to my own experiences in the classroom and my own experiences as a teacher. There were so many ways that things could have been different. And so much of it is about trying to help people to see what's possible and then empowering communities and teachers and schools to be able to actualize those visions. And I was so proud that we were able to do so much of that with that $150 million. And it was incredibly exciting to watch this push that came from teachers themselves to modernize and elevate the teaching profession, that came from the 5 years where we had this just opportunity and this space where we made super clear how much we thought about the potential of teacher leadership to make a difference. And we weren't doing it thinking about systems, and we weren't doing it thinking about bureaucracies. At the end of the day, we were thinking about kids. And for me, I was thinking about that kid I was in school, the million of other kids who experienced the same thing that I did. I thought all the time about how much I wanted to make sure that we were able to invest in those educators that were really pushing their systems to feel and look different, so that kids aren't just getting suspended or expelled or made to feel like outsiders, but that we were actually pushing to remake our school system in ways that will both see and support kids in stronger ways. And, ultimately, I do really believe, and I push this every day in the work that I do, that our systems are going to be so much better, so much more equitable, so much more focused on ensuring that all kids have the best teachers in front of them every single day and the best principals leader in their building, if those systems are being built with the voices of teachers, and if the voices of teachers are heard at the highest level of our school systems.
As you talk about expanding what is possible, was there one of those initiatives that you've seen that really you looked at the transformation or the impact they had and you just thought, wow, that's incredible? There's
been some really exciting work that was happening in a number of school districts around some of this teacher leadership work, where you saw this alignment, where you saw system leaders all the way at the top who were really clear that they wanted to hear the voice of teachers, and made that incredibly clear that any policy decision, it wasn't going to just be, rubber stamped by teachers, which often can happen, but that they really wanted to make sure that they were having teachers there as voting partners and as true thought partners and helping to weigh in on critical decisions. And from that, it created a cadre of teacher leaders across the state, teachers in every single school building that could be called upon, and that had voices in policy questions, and ultimately would be those teachers that wanted to advocate for having change to their systems. And, I think that kind of stuff is some of the most powerful. Initiatives that are going to be the longest lasting are going to be the ones where teachers have had a direct voice in both shaping them, but also in that constant reevaluation of what that work looks like. And I think the places where we saw less success were places where initiatives were more one-off. Whether they were things that were, initiatives that, were one-off because they were just, one specific grant, or initiatives that were sort of unclear in how they could be expanded to more individuals. And it, I think, can become confusing, frankly, for teachers in particular, as well as for system leaders, when there isn't that role alignment, that clarity all the way from the top down about how different initiatives come together. And so we spend a lot of time in New York, and I watch it now with our members who spend a lot of time really making sure that the work that they're trying to lead is led with teachers directly there at the table, and really a ton of lessons learned over this particularly the last 8 years, about just how critical it is to make sure that teachers are constantly at the table, and that you're not just having one-off councils or just some community meetings as the only place where you're seeking that voice, but making it much more intentional, much more about a two-way communication.
As you've been on this incredible journey of innovation and change making and collaboration and everything that you've not only created and helped create an experience on the outside, but what you've created on the inside, I'm sure, throughout that journey, what advice would you like to give to other millennials who are also on a path of fulfillment or passionate success?
So I'd start by saying I feel like I'm still figuring this out. And, it is a work in progress. It is bumpy. And there's like this constant feeling, at least for me, of just sort of wonder about, is this the right, next step? Is this the right piece of my journey? And one of the things I think is the most important on this is really trying to think about who you are as an individual. What has been your experience? What is your personal narrative? How does that then motivate you? Because there are so many times when the work that you can do, it can feel frustrating and you can feel mistreated. And as I shared, there are haters. And if you know yourself and you know what you are looking for and how your own personal journey impacts the decisions of your day, it makes it so much easier in those rough times finding the people that you care about, that you trust, and keeping them close in your inner circle and choosing those people wisely is so critical as well on this journey that you're on. As we continue to be in this such a hyper-networked world, there are so many people who are going to want to help you. But finding that core group, those people who know you and know your limits and who push you past those limits is so critical. I tell people often that you should have a list that you keep, a list of like the 5 things that you truly believe that no matter what happens, those 5 things, those are things that you are going to gravitate towards. Those are the things that you are going to make sure always happen. But also in parallel to that, the list of things that you will never do. This is particularly important in roles as you're moving up in your career. What are the things that are just absolute deal breakers for you? And find that core group of people, those 3 to 5 people in your life, and give them those 2 lists. And then hold yourself accountable. Go back to them. Go back to them yearly. The list of the things that you promise that are critical that you're going to do, and then that list of things that no matter what, no matter how tried you get, they're just the deal breakers. And hold yourself accountable. And I think that can help you so much as you're going along your journey, in particular if you're going to take on work that is more political in nature, work that involves a leadership trajectory, and making sure that you are constantly remembering that the work is not about you. It's not personal, and making sure that you just remember all the time that it is about yielding to this mission that is greater than all of us, and choosing to endure and choosing to rejoice over these small victories and insisting on larger ones and larger ones. And every time that you feel like you've hit that next step on your path and you want to pause at the top, pause, but you're not there yet. And just keep choosing to go on to that next big win, and choose to love and choose to change your mind, and make sure that it is through those changes that you are finding transformation that leads you to the next step of your journey. Because it can be easy to want to stay put, and it can stay comfortable. And, there's many times where I've wondered about sort of the next stage of the work, and it can feel good to feel comfortable when you've invested a significant amount in what you're currently doing, but being able to take some time and really think about that voice in the back of your mind that's reminding you that there's more, that there is more to change, that there's more to transform, that there's more people to serve, and really thinking about what you can do with your path, how you'll handle that hand that you've been dealt. Really think about how you change your mind and change your life and change the lives of those that you are committing to in order to help make the world a stronger place that you can feel proud of.
Speaking of change and transformation, was there anything that would have been on one of those lists for you, like lists you really believe, or lists, things you would never consider, that has had to change at some point in your life? So I'm just thinking I think especially early in life, sometimes we'll have something that we feel we believe really deeply, and then later through experience or education or both turn out to be actually, I was so convinced of this, and not necessarily even professionally, but sometimes personally. And one example for me was that I really believed when I was in high school that if you didn't want the entire world to know about something, you couldn't tell anyone. Because one time I told my friend in high school, Matt, I'll call him out. But, no shame. But I told him I like this girl, and he, by the end of the day, he had told a number of other people. And so my internal belief from there was, you can never tell anyone anything. And then as I grew and evolved, I realized actually, one of the best ways to connect with people deeply is to share things that you care about and that you're passionate about. So I'm curious if there's anything along your journey, and I'm not saying it has to be super deep. It could be something, trivial, but that has changed for you over the years.
For me, I think it's this idea that nothing is set. Everything's negotiable, and it's so much of it is actually about, and I think you just hit it, it's sharing your perspective and helping other people to understand and to help shape their views. And so much of leadership and so much of service and so much of life is about trying to constantly help shape ideas. And I just view it as being so much more successful if it can be done through your personal journey and helping people to understand your perspective and using that as a way to help bridge divides between people and their life experiences. And I think the more that we can share and help people to understand our life experiences, just how much stronger the work can be. And I'm thinking specifically about when I was a competitive figure skater, and I was 13, and I was invited to assist as a coach for the Special Olympics skating team in my town. And it was a chance to skate in what was like the first inclusion kind of team. So I was a special education teacher. I taught an inclusion classroom. So it means that it's a classroom that's both students with disabilities as well as those who do not have any diagnosed disabilities. And so similarly, in this kind of early part of my life, I was on this skating team that was both Special Olympics skaters as well as skaters who were not part of Special Olympics. And we would skate together and we performed routines and we performed at the Special Olympics together in like a showcase. And I found so much that through this inclusion model, the skaters that were not part of Special Olympics were so much less afraid. And there was so much more of a sense of understanding. And these Special Olympics skaters were benefiting so much because they had so much support and they had these excellent examples of others to observe and learn from. And for the first time, we were all a part of this community where everyone felt valued and nobody was being judged. And it was through that work with Special Olympics that I first discovered that voice and that desire to serve students with disabilities, because I saw firsthand what this could look like in a model where you had this sort of inclusion setting. I had no idea that, there was such a thing as inclusion classrooms. And it was just, these things were not a part of my structure at 13 years old, but it completely changed my view about how much we could change through our lived experiences with people and how much we could change models and think differently. There was no reason that, why couldn't we have an inclusion skating team? It just hadn't been done. It was the first time.
I love that sense of possibility.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to be in the presence of your amazing passion and excitement about what you're doing. Would you share with the audience before we go where they can find you and your work?
Yes, and that was very kind. It is such an honor to be on this show. I so appreciate the opportunity to just share a little bit about my journey. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Julia Rafal-Baer, and you can also find the work that we're doing at Chiefs for Change on our website, which if you just put in Chiefs for Change, you will find our website and you'll learn more about our Chiefs. And if you are one of those people who aspires to be at that system leader role, I hope that I will hear from you, and I hope that you will put yourself in. We have a nomination form for our Future Chiefs program and would love to hear from you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Thanks, guys.
The Motivational Millennial podcast is supported by Motivational Millennial Coaching Services. We help you find clarity and confidence so you can take action toward living your dream life. To learn more about one-on-one personalized support from someone who believes you have a path to fulfillment and wants to help you uncover it, visit www.motivationalmillennial.com/coaching. Happy Valentine's Day!
Hello, lovers out there.
Well, Valentine's Day is also for loving other individuals and also loving the planet. And
that's right, and loving yourself.
It's celebrating love of all kinds.
That's right. We haven't rehearsed this in case you didn't.
This is not just for lovers, okay? If you're not a lover right now, just know that this after show is still for you.
Welcome to Live 106.9 with Delilah here. We're going to be talking to all...
Yeah. We thought it would be so great to release Julia Rafal-Baer's episode on Valentine's Day because she has this amazing amount of passion and vision and love for her work and love for students and love for changing the world. And we thought that would be such a fabulous thing to highlight on Valentine's Day, the day of love. So I actually have a little story to tell.
Tell us a story, Ivy.
Oh my gosh, you're not even going to know how funny that voice is for this story. So the other day I was out with my dog in the garden and I saw this spider who had made this huge web in between all these trees, and I couldn't even tell. It looked like it was just floating in space. I couldn't tell exactly where the webs were going. I was just like studying it and looking at it. And I thought to myself, I wonder if this is the most efficient location to have this web. Like, my brain went to strategy, like questioning like the very nature of this creature. Like, I was thinking about giving this spider like strategic advice. Like, I don't know. I wonder if this is actually the most strategic place to put this. And I realized how incredibly absurd that was, because the spider is not questioning its strategy. The spider is just going and creating because it's naturally what it does. It knows what to do. It knows how to keep itself fed. It knows how to make this. I don't have to tell it how to do its job.
Right. It's not doing research and development. Like,
right.
I'm testing various web locations to see which one will produce the most bug capture per square foot.
And what's my perfect bug audience that I want to go, And so it was in that moment that I really understood that spider just trusts itself. There is an immense amount of knowing and trust happening. It doesn't have to figure stuff out. And I was thinking about how much we could do to trust ourselves without having to strategize constantly all the time and second guessing our own instincts. I think that we forget that we also have intuition and a knowing that doesn't have to involve doing all of this crazy R&D or whatever to make things happen. And it reminded me of what I wanted to talk about with Julia, because she has this incredible amount of ownership, authorship, and trust of herself. Like, she, even in that story that really got her going in her career, where she saw that there was something wrong going on, and she didn't like sit around and think, okay, is this going to be the most effective way to handle this? Who should I send this to? Should I send, like, she was just like, you know what? This is wrong. And I'm going to write this and I'm going to send this right now to this top person and just do it. Mm-hmm. She is guided so strongly by this inner knowing, by this higher calling and intuition, and screw whoever gets in the way of that. And she's such a great example of an empowered millennial. Because millennials have this, they're not inhibited so much by the way it's always been done. Or strategies needing to be a certain way, right? They're just like, well, that's okay that's worked for you, but they're like about breaking the rules kind of, in a sense, like that doesn't have to apply to me. When they say the rule, millennials are so annoying because they think the rules don't apply to them. Well, that's how innovation happens. That is how that happens. When you're using it in an empowered way and in a very focused and passionate and amazing way, like Julia's doing, can be a really great outcome.
Yeah, I've heard that also described as everything is negotiable. Both good and bad,
yeah,
right?
Good and bad. Yeah.
Like, what do you mean I didn't get an A? Like, I deserved an A, It's like, no, this is your grade. Like, you didn't know. So there's certainly that sort of entitled side of it. But more to your point about the empowered aspect, if reality is negotiable, then you have the power to shape reality in the ways that you want to shape it. Or in Julia's example, if you feel like the educational policy is not providing adequate equity for students or adequate resources for teachers, then you can take action. And she has consistently taken action towards that goal.
What'd you think of my spider story?
I really...
Oh, when you said, dude, tell us the story. Like, it was like from it was like from The Fly. No, like from The Fly. I was like, help me. Like, you were personifying the spider right then. It made me laugh.
Yeah, no, I was going to offer to give acoustic narration as you were describing it. But then it wasn't a very tactile story. It turned out being more conceptual and very insightful. No, I thought it was good. I thought you're absolutely right. There is the blessing and the curse. It is our self-awareness as humans, our self-awareness of who we are in relation to other people, our awareness of our own limitations and ultimate death, but also of our awesomeness and potential. So, not to turn this into a super existential after show.
I mean, they're kind of all existential.
That's true. It's sort of the nature of the podcast. But you're right. There's instinct, trusting your instinct. And it goes back to this idea of trusting yourself, which is a common theme here as well.
Trusting yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
It may or may not have been on the previous after show.
I know. Oh, too funny.
Yeah.
What was alignment? What about you? What came up for you?
I really appreciated how Julia is such a remarkable example of the power that having a shared vision with other people can generate. And more personally, I think for a lot of people who feel like we are alone, or we ask ourselves why people would like us or want to spend time with us when there's a lot of self-doubt, I think having something that you care about that's outside of yourself, that other people also care about, is so powerful and helps you connect with people and helps you receive help in kind where other people believe in your vision and want to support you, or you find like-minded people. And Julia has really done that in the education space, from her studies to being a teacher, then getting into government and creating policy and administering grants, and seeing this vision and then building this huge team. And even now, like with Chiefs for Change, that's what the purpose of her organization is to connect these educational leaders to each other and say, we're here to support you and give you resources. And so for anyone out there, I think, who is feeling stuck or feeling like you're not accomplishing enough or don't know how to connect with other people in some ways, I think find other people who really care about that thing you really care about, or try really caring about something. If you don't know what that thing is, like, just give it a shot. Hey, this week I'm going to go to some meetups about, photography or art or dancing or film or whatever you're into, or business. So those are some meandering but hopefully helpful reflections. What do you think, Ivy?
Yeah, I started imagining myself going to different meetups with different themes.
Or creating
so then I got
one.
distracted thinking about all these different things. No, yeah, I definitely agree with your perspective on the importance of community and passion. I think sometimes we can feel really alone in the world, and I mean, sometimes we go and try to fill that aloneness void by going on social media and reading about everyone's lives and feeling somehow more connected, or terrible about yourself because your life's not cool enough or whatever is happening. But I think sometimes we try to fill that void by connecting about things that we're pissed about, things that we're upset about, things that we're like angry about, things that we hate, and we want to like go and rant and like rada. Like most of the comments on Facebook on anything, even if it's like a very positive video that goes like as a puppy, oftentimes it's people just ranting about something that they're angry about. So I think that taking that energy that we're using either consciously or subconsciously to create community around fear, and when we're not conscious about how we're using that energy, it can be such a more fulfilling and impactful and beautiful way to live your life in the way that you're talking about, which is using that energy and creating community around something that's positive and that creates passion and that you're alive about in a positive and healthy way.
Yeah, and I think that applies on small and large scale levels. Like there's the whole idea when you're talking interpersonally with people, tell them the thing you want, not the thing you don't want. So, for example, if you're giving someone feedback, and they talk about this even in acro yoga, for example, I know is one example that immediately comes to mind, where you don't say, hey, don't press so hard on my shoulder. You say, hey, lighten your foot on my shoulder. So you're not saying what you don't want. You're giving people positive instruction on what you do want. And that helps people know what to do. And I think you see this with kids all the time, you know, kids who are being rambunctious. Stay still, sit there, stop that. Okay, what else do you want them to do, right? This kid's got a ton of energy. Stop that? Okay, well, he stops that. Okay, he's bouncing with energy. No, hey, you're running around right now. Seems like you've got a lot of energy. Let's have you go do this thing. Put them in gymnastics or soccer or whatever, you know?
It reminds me of the nonviolent communication / compassionate communication model.
Yeah.
I want to tell you more about this at some point in detail, but that's one of the things that it talks about is you come at it focused on your feelings and experiences that are non-judgmental. You make it clear what your needs are, and you make a very clear request of what that need is. And all of that is non-judgmental. It's just, you know, you're expressing your own experience of what's happening. And then you're making a clear request that's not demanding. Like, you know, you just stop taking too long to text me or whatever, you know what I mean? But it's like, I don't want to go down that whole path of like explaining what that is, but that's what it reminded me of. If anyone's interested in looking about that communication style, to your point, interpersonally, it reminded me of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the interpersonal version of that. And then there's what Julia's doing with Chiefs for Change, which is looking at it even on a policy level or a national level, which is it can be really easy to say, we don't like this policy or we don't like this governmental action or this governmental figure. And it's certainly important to oppose, you know, corruption and abuse of power and all these things. But on the flip side, creating a world that you want to see is so much more powerful and compelling in the long term. I mean, it's sort of that idea that people can get really, in the short term, you know, inflamed and angry and take immediate action. But to sustain, it's got to be a pull, not a push.
Yeah, that's astute.
So I think just returning to what Julia's doing, her compelling vision of the future has been that pull in around education policy. And it stems from her personal experiences, and she has managed to connect it and connect with other people as well.
Wonderful. Well, that seems like a great place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for having a great conversation with me today, Blake.
Well, thank you, Ivy.
And thank you all for listening to the episode and to the after show. We wish you a very wonderful, loving Valentine's Day. For yourself, buy yourself some flowers. Daffodils are my favorite. Not that they need to be your favorite, but they're my favorite. Email me at ivy@motivationalmillennial.com to let me know your favorite flower. Let's start a conversation. Love y'all.
It could be the thing that, you know, that could be your thing. Some people like photography. Maybe you like flowers. Ivy is right on board there with you. She's member number 2 of your flower community. All right, friends. Peace, love, flower power. We'll catch you next week. We have a free gift for you, hot off the virtual presses. If you go to motivationalmillennial.com/free gift, you can get your very own personal transformation guide that illustrates the 4 limiting beliefs that we commonly have as millennials and 8 motivational tools to overcome them. So go to motivationalmillennial.com. That's millennial, MILLENNIAL.com/free gift. For show notes and upcoming guests, or to learn more about Coactive Coaching, the blog, and our other awesome offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
The Motivational Millennial podcast is edited by Christy Hostler and Team Podcast.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Blake Brandis. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!